And all my life I had been an athlete. I was very fortunate to be able to play college football at Cornell, and I also played semi-pro football for the Racine Raiders for 3 years. During that time, I had an experience of my life, which was to get a call to go down and get a tryout with the Atlanta Falcons. Didn't last as long as I wanted to, but gave it a good shot. Anyway, the point of it is that I'd always been an athlete. I'd always been someone who had kept himself in pretty good shape and did a lot of lifting and powerlifting and got into things like that. But I also kept myself in good condition as far as running a lot and being involved in all kinds of sports. One of the things that I did a lot was cross-country ski race. Well, that's what kind of eventually put me in a position where I got into this age now, and things started to fall apart on me. I had a lot of problems physically. I developed diabetes at the age of 48, and my entire family had diabetes and had a lot of bad things happen because of that. And so I wanted to start taking care of myself. Well, it just wasn't working. Things were getting worse and worse and worse. And I ended up taking 5 oral medications, and then finally eventually got on insulin, 2 different insulins, and ended up taking about 5 shots a day to try to control my blood sugar. And it was almost impossible. I mean, I watched my diet the best I could. I worked out. I tried to do the best I could. But people with diabetes know that eventually it just catches up with you. And I started getting weak. And I think that was the toughest thing, was the psychological problems of feeling weak. All my life I had been strong and could bench press 400 pounds and could run fast and all those things that we all like to talk about when we were young. But it just wasn't happening anymore. And I started to feel very weak. And I started getting very bad problems with neuropathy in my legs. And that really hurt me more psychologically, I think, as much as physically, obviously. But to not to be able to do things anymore, to not be able to go out and ski and not to be able to lift weights because everything hurt. All the muscles in my body hurt. And I just couldn't control my A1C. I couldn't control the blood sugar no matter what I did. And it got real tired of stabbing myself and taking shots. Well, it all came to a head where I had an opportunity, of course, to go see my doctor every 3 months. And when I sat down in a chair and talked to the doctor, and he explained to me that my A1C was over 9.5, which is very, very bad. And he told me that I'd probably, because of the neuropathy in my legs and the numbness of my feet for over the past 6 months, that I'd probably start losing, like my mother and father and all my relatives on that side, I'd start losing toes and have to cut off part of my feet. And that was so terrifying to me. And along with that, of course, is the point that when he told me that my heart attack potential was that I was 70 years old and had my first heart attack already, that was my risk factor. Well, with all that hitting me, I didn't know what to do. His answer was to put me on the pump so I could all day long just keep pumping insulin into my body. Well, I knew there was something wrong with that, but I really had no other alternative. I really didn't have anything different to do, because you listen to your doctor and you do what you've got to do. And so that really bothered me. But as I was walking out to the parking lot, a revelation, it was almost like God was talking to me, but I got weak knees. I had a hard time even walking. But that statement that he said to me, that I was 70 years old and had my first heart attack already, just hit me like a brick. And I could hardly, I sat behind the wheel of my truck to drive home, and I was absolutely just distraught. And I went home that day, and it bothered me for just so long, but I really didn't have, again, any alternative. Well, about 1.5 years ago, I went deer hunting, which we do here in Wisconsin, and got out in the woods, and I couldn't make it back. I fell 3 times out in the woods, and my legs were so bad, and I had such bad muscle cramps every night from the Lipitor that I was taking for 8 years. And the doctor warned me about it, but what alternative did I have, because my cholesterol was out of sight, my triglycerides were out of sight, and I was just in really, really bad shape. Well, I fell down, and thank God that I had a good friend, and he said to me, he said, "Kirk," he said, they actually carried me literally almost back to the cabin. And I sat there that night, and you know, you want to cry, but you have a little bit of an ego, and you just don't want to do that. But I felt like crying. I really didn't know what to do. The emotions were just racing through me, because I was 55 years old, and I was already felt like I was 85. And it was just a terrible feeling for any man to feel. And I I really didn't know what to do. And my friend, Dave, looked at me and he said, Kirk, he says, I have something that might help you. And I looked at him and I said, Dave, I don't care what it is. I don't care what it is. I don't care what's made of it. I don't care what it is. He said, no, Kirk, no. He said, it's all natural. He said, it is a tremendous product. It comes from Thailand and from the Eastern Bloc area. I said, it's a fruit. And I just really feel like I have to do this. I have to introduce you to this, and you got to give it a shot. And of course, me being a police officer for 12 years when I was younger, and training police officers all over the country for the last 34 years of my life, I'm of course very suspicious. And the things in my mind was, oh, come on, what is some kind of snake oil? What are you trying to get me involved in or whatever? So I was very suspicious, and he looked at me, and another revelation hit me. He put his hand on my shoulder sitting in that cabin, and he looked at me and he said, well, how's everything else working for you so far? And it was like getting hit in the head with a brick. I was like, yeah, I can see where over the last 8 years how I've deteriorated, not only physically, mentally, but now I was so distraught because of just the mindset. You know, when you don't feel good, you just don't want to do anything. And then that just precipitates more not doing anything. And it got worse. And so finally I looked at Dave and I said, whatever you got, man, give it to me. I'll take it. And I'll give it the best shot, whatever, see what happens. I had absolutely nothing to lose. And so he brought me the product, and I started drinking it, and I took a pretty good dose initially of it, because I thought, well, I'm going to just give this thing a rock and see what happens. And after about 3 weeks, I got up in the morning and I had energy. I felt like doing things again. I started walking. Within 3 weeks, all the numbness in my legs went away. All the numbness in my feet went away. And I noticed that when I was taking my blood sugar counts, that I didn't have such high spikes. I mean, I'm still a diabetic, and I'll probably always be a diabetic the rest of my life. That's just a condition I'm stuck with. But by taking this product on a daily basis, on a regular basis, I was able to control those huge spikes, those 300, 350 counts of my blood sugar, where now my counts were in the low 200s and high 100s, which is manageable. Now I could take one shot, counter it, and I was fine. But what really started happening was my energy level. And I started feeling like a man again. I didn't feel like an old man. I felt like I could do things again. And now my attitude is such that I can do anything. And now I'm walking every day. I'm even getting back into skiing. I started lifting weights again, just to try to make myself feel better. And that, of course, helps your mind. And so between me physically feeling better and so forth, this was incredible. Well, then the revelation really came to the surface when I went back to the doctor. And you know, as a diabetic, we take our tests, our A1C test, about every 3 months. Well, when I went back, I couldn't believe it. My A1C was 6.1. Now, when you figure the average person between 5 and 6, so I was almost average. And my cholesterol dropped from 220 down to 129. My triglycerides, which were over 3,000, dropped to a little over 350. And my blood pressure, which I never had a problem with being an athlete, my heart was always pretty strong, but my blood pressure was a solid, 120/75. And I just couldn't believe it. And my doctor was so excited, he called me twice. In case one time he left a message, he called me back personally. He said, I have to talk to you personally. He said, I've never seen anybody with diabetes in a 90-day period just totally have complete control of this thing. What are you doing? And I told him, and he said, well, I don't know anything about it, but whatever you're doing, keep doing it. And so since then, it's just been a joy to get up every morning and not feel like I'm 85 years old. I feel like I'm 35 years old again. Well, up to this time, I've not mentioned anything about what I was taking. I told you that it was a juice. Well, I'm going to tell you now that it's the mangosteen. And mangosteen absolutely changed my life.